Well, he was part right with the Babe Ruth reference. I am an old guy, a really old guy, it seems like. But anyway, yeah, it's a pleasure. I've known Jennifer probably for 25 or more years now. Back in the old days when I was still at home on the ranch, I was on the Nebraska Beef Council and involved with, I was actually on the executive committee of the National Livestock and Meat Board at one time before it merged with Cattlemen to become NCBA, NCA to become NCBA. And so I knew Jennifer back in those days, and we worked together on issues there. And so I'm sure that she's excited about the year ahead, getting prepared to be president, and I'm sure she'll do a great job. And as far as traceability goes, she's kind of in a unique situation, is that she represents with her own business one of the segments that I think is challenged with understanding exactly how they work and interface with animal traceability on a speed of commerce time frame. And so I think she'll provide some great insight and leadership to the beef industry to help them work together with all segments to be able to move forward. Maybe just a little bit, I think a lot of you know my background, but I still kind of consider myself a rancher from central Nebraska, even though I've kind of had to step away from, or I've had to step away from day-to-day management and marketing. I still enjoy very much when I can steal a little bit of time to get back to the ranch, or more so when I have the opportunity to talk to my son, who came back to the ranch this summer because he wasn't sure that the workload that I'd left on his mother was quite fair. So he went home to help work with the foreman and the other two guys and help his mom understand ranch accounts and stuff, and we're excited to have him home. We have triplets, and so Alec is one of those. And Evan works in agriculture as well. He works in Minneapolis. He works for the Schooler Company, grain trading company that's based out of Omaha, Nebraska. And then our daughter Emily lives in Denver, Colorado, and is a lobbyist for the Colorado Farm Bureau. So we're happy to have all of our children still paying attention to agriculture, still involved in agriculture, and look forward to their future in agriculture as well. As Director of Ag for 12 years and 6 years as Assistant Director before that, I had the great opportunity to kind of become versed in the programs that as a customer, as a State Director of Ag, you're really a customer of APHIS and AMS, because a lot of the programs that I have in MRP are what relate directly to those state departments of agriculture across our nation. And so I got to learn about those programs as a customer, and now I'm the service deliverer. And so I come with some preconceived notions as to how that relationship works, how we can make it work better. And I also understand when some state director, commissioner, or secretary is telling me it doesn't work this way, I also understand whether it really might work that way if they just wanted to make it work that way. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to work together with state partners, with industry, because those are really my roots. The industry first, and then the State Department of Agriculture, to be able to come to USDA to work together. As we've approached the farm, I'm going to talk about a few different things other than what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, just so that there's still a reason for me to be able to get free breakfast out of somebody in the morning. But as we've worked on the Farm Bill, there's been a lot of discussion in the Farm Bill about disease traceability and disease management, and most of that has focused on foot and mouth disease. And what would we do in the event that foot and mouth disease shows up here in the United States? And we at USDA have talked about a three-legged stool with surveillance and prevention and being prepared and being able to control, contain, and eradicate as being one of those important legs. That really, that leg is the leg that has let us go nearly over 70 years and working close to 100 years without, not quite 100 yet, but well over 70 without having foot and mouth here in the United States. But as we look now at what's going on around the world, you know, while we were worried about foot and mouth disease, African swine fever has really erupted and become something that, while the beef industry doesn't necessarily need to worry about it, it's something that's very scary to the pork industry. So it shows that we can't just focus on one disease. There's many diseases out there in the world that are scary and that could have a huge economic impact on our livestock industry. But it also shows how important, when we look at how China's epidemic has grown and grown with parts of their growth of that disease, that they've been willing to acknowledge that it just keeps, the circle keeps getting bigger. There's more circles that keep expanding and overlapping. That the ability to identify a disease, know where it came from, where it was going, and then being able to try to attack it and control and contain it is very important. And of course, traceability plays a big role in that, and probably the very foundation of that concern. The other part of that is a lab system that is able to diagnose and be close to where the producers are, be close to where the species that we're needing to make diagnosis are from, and being close to state departments of agriculture make producers more, or state universities make producers more willing to interact with that. And then finally, you know, if there are vaccines available out there, vaccines are an important tool that we would use in most animal disease outbreaks to try to manage them. African swine fever doesn't have a vaccine available, so that wouldn't be a tool that's in our toolbox there, but it's something we're working on. As we look forward, though, to, you know, managing for today and what might be available on the forefront, biotechnology is something that falls within APHIS's realm on the plant side very firmly. But as we see opportunities for disease resistance and humane animal care and management to be part of the future in animal biotechnology, I think it's very important that all of our industries work together to try to embrace what biotechnology could mean for us. If we can quit dehorning cattle because we can introduce the genes very efficiently without losing, especially in the dairy herd, without losing milk production by using biotechnology, what a great leap forward. If we can eliminate the costs that PRRS places on our swine industry through biotechnology without losing feed efficiency and meat production ability, what a great opportunity. And as you know, that's one of the sources of debate in D.C. right now, is who's going to manage biotechnology and who's going to figure out the regulatory framework to be able to allow us to embrace and utilize that. And that's something that's very important that we get through, and we're going to have a summit together with FDA on several subjects, but biotechnology is also one thing that we're discussing with FDA right now. But while we're discussing how we move forward, those technologies have been advanced, perfected, and are ready for commercialization. And what we see is the research that's been done in the United States is now moving to Canada and South America to be commercialized. And that means that there's jobs being developed in the countries just to the north of us and in our competing countries worldwide that is going away from the United States. There's investment that's going away from the United States. And maybe more important than either one of those two is the fact that they're gaining a competitive advantage on us because they're able to use that technology. So this is something we need to get figured out, and we need to get figured out soon so that the U.S. producing livestock producers are able to take advantage of that. And that's something that when the president was, when the secretary was first sworn in, the president picked the secretary to lead a task force on rural prosperity. And 22 different federal agencies worked together to figure out how we develop the rural economy under Secretary Perdue's leadership. And they came out with 5 main points, but one of them was harnessing technological innovation. And so that's something that 22 different agencies identified as an important point, and that we understand, looking at the opportunities that we're delaying being able to take advantage of, that's something that's very important that we need to get right as we move forward. Part of that is also developing the rural economy, and not by trying to bring outside forces into rural America, but it's by looking at rural America and saying, what are people in communities across our United States capable of doing? What culturally are they excellent at doing? What fits the natural resources of their region? And in many of the states across our nation, livestock agriculture is one of those answers. We grow the feedstuffs for the feed for those animals. We have strong heritages in livestock production across agriculture in rural areas of America, and that presents a great opportunity for us to be able to play to our strengths, to be able to not only produce food for our domestic population, but also look around the world. We're going to figure out these trade difficulties we're working through right now. We're going to end up with agreements that allow for us to be able to move animals and meat products around based on science and based on fair trade, not just free trade. And so once we figure that out, look what the American farmer and rancher have already been able to compete very well with unfair trade rules. If we have a level playing field, I can only imagine the success that rural America will have in the international marketplace when we don't have to compete against a double standard. And so I think maybe just to quickly summarize, and then I guess I've been volunteered to take questions, and any ones I can't answer, Glenn will help me out with. And but you know, I mentioned that we had triplets. And so when you have triplets, and we were very involved we were in a small community, the kids' high school class was 22. We were involved in 4-H and FFA, and when you have triplets, you know, everybody's in the show ring at the same time. Everybody is working on a proficiency at the same time. Everybody's in the same class officer election pyramid. So you learn very quickly that not everybody can be number one, not everybody can be valedictorian, not everybody can be president of the FFA chapter, not everybody can be champion at the county fair. And we weren't always champion at the county fair. There were some other kids that got that opportunity quite a few times as well. But we developed a philosophy at home that when one of us won, we all won. And that was something that we started out from the time they were small, that we were all in this together as a family. And I think that's something that's very true for agriculture too. Although we have differences within our sectors as well as within regions of the United States, in agriculture we are such a small population compared to many of the other interest groups out there and around us, that we have to remember when one of us wins, we all win. And we need to figure out how to work together to make sure that somebody can win so that we all can win. So thank you very much. Any questions? As far as
the energy, the conversation, is anything shifted? Are we going to have
around traceability, around trade, around biotechnology, traceability. So I think that The Farm Bill was that discussion about animal disease and what a foreign animal disease would mean to the economic viability of the livestock industry was helpful. I also think that it gave producers, especially in the beef industry, a chance to finally point to something and understand something that actually was of value to them. Because in a lot of ways, the conversations we'd been having about traceability in the beef industry, as a cow-calf producer, lots of like I am myself, lots of cow-calf producers had trouble figuring out how that benefited them, because they didn't necessarily get carcass data back from the packer. They didn't necessarily, get their feed efficiency or rate of gain information back from the feedlot, and so it was hard for lots of producers to understand what the value was to them. But when you start talking about a disease that could come and wipe out your entire herd, or a forced depopulation of your entire herd, I think it was a different realization. And so we need to continue to work together to help all segments of the beef industry understand what the value to them is and how they can participate in it. And I think some of the things we're talking about with the Traceability Working Group, as well as what we're going to be able to announce and work with the beef industry into the future, are going to provide not only incentives but opportunities for value for them.
On that same point, topic that often comes up regarding traceability of disease is mitigating legal issues. And how do you, or how is this being addressed that, particularly the cow-calf operator, once the animal's out of his hands, he's absolved from any liability. So how do you address that or handle the legal ramifications that might come from tracing disease back to a specific branch or something?
And I know that has been a concern for a long time, and I have more faith in the philosophy that if you have good management practices put in place, if you document what you do, so if you're participating in a traceability scheme, you're probably working with a group or an organization to document what practices you put in place on your farm and ranch. And so I have a lot of faith in that being the way that you protect yourself from claims that you used antibiotics wrong, or you used feed ingredients that were prohibited, or some of those concerns that a cow-calf operation, they voiced those concerns in the past. Well, how do I know it didn't happen at the feedlot? But if you have those practices in place, you're participating in a traceability scheme that have somebody come in and audit the practices to say what you say you're doing, you're actually doing. I have faith in that process. So I think the hearing that we have coming up with FDA has more to do with the cellular meat, or the fake meat, or clean meat, or whatever camp you're in. And so that isn't necessarily biotechnology, but it is advancements in what we're able to do with cellular technology now. And so that is the discussion that's coming up here in October, I believe. So there's two different opportunities for that decision to be made, or maybe three actually. One, the two agencies could get together and make a decision on how we can move forward with that. The other opportunity is for the administration to pick an agency to try to centralize that in. And the president actually has a plan in his government consolidation plan that he released earlier this year, that USDA would be in charge of the singular food safety agency within the federal government. So a lot of people, when that came out, thought that that probably wasn't, there were a lot of different things in that proposal that affected everything from immigration to food safety. But so the administration does have a little bit of an idea and a stake in the ground that a single food safety agency wouldn't be a bad idea, and they have designated that that would be USDA. But that might take an executive order or something, and that could change with the next administration, as we've seen with executive orders. And so the third option would be that Congress makes a decision, and there are some discussions going on Capitol Hill right now that Congress can make a decision. And so, those are all discussions that are going on. I'm sure Congress is listening to groups and organizations across the United States for maybe even what you as individuals are interested in having happen there. Well, obviously we saw when we worked to open up China that traceability still is a big deal to a large potential market like that. And lots of other countries have an interest in, what's your traceability, what's your disease status. How do you know that's your disease status if you don't have traceability, and some of those questions. But I think also consumers have shown more and more that they're interested in the story about where their food came from. They want to know there's traceability within that food system. When I was a kid, Mom and Dad, we all went to the grocery store together usually, and Mom had the sale circular, and she bought based on what was on sale. And we bought whatever was on sale that day, and then the next week or 2 weeks later when we were there, we bought what was on sale there, and she stockpiled lots of stuff, but we bought based on price. And that's really the only consideration that we made at the grocery store was price. There's very few things we bought because we like that brand. And so, but that's different now. The consumer goes to the grocery store, and the sales circular at our house gets thrown away with the rest of the newspaper unopened because nobody had time to read it at home. Or if they were at home, they didn't have time to. Right now, nobody's at home a lot of the time, but so people buy on brands, they buy on reputation, they buy on what the meat case says about the product there, and so that story and that traceability becomes very important. And so I think that's another reason why traceability can be valued by producers, and producers are going to be able to see a value in it. I think the other reason why I think we have a better opportunity to make traceability work is because we've all learned a lot from the last 14 or 15 years of talking about this. And we've learned that certain discussions didn't get us down the road. And I think we at USDA are now ready to embrace putting together some of the basics and the cornerstones and having the basic frameworks put in place to be able to allow the data to move back and forth, to be in a position to be able to start moving forward with, if we need to give the industry a gentle nudge here and there, that we're going to be ready to do that. I don't mean to leave out pork and poultry in some of these comments, but they're so much farther down the road than the beef industry. It's hard to talk about what they need to do to catch up, or where they need what goals they need to do, because we're really focused on being able to help the beef industry bring some catch up to where pork and poultry are. We also need to look forward to some of the ways that we can move data electronically, and electronic health certificates, I think, are an important part of that. As Director of Ag, it wouldn't be strange at all. We're a big livestock feeding state in Nebraska, and so it wouldn't be strange at all that we would get health certificates 3 or 4 months down the road from when the cattle had actually arrived in the feedlot. They might be at the packing plant before somebody found the health certificate laying on the dash, tore it out, and started sending it through the system. And so we know that isn't going to help us out if we need to trace animals in a foreign animal disease outbreak. So we have some very key roles to play at USDA as well. Pardon? Aren't you? Well, I look forward to visiting with you again in the morning. Oh.
Quick question. I'm not from around here, so pardon my naivety on this question, but from your perspective and traceability, who's the major beneficiary of traceability in your country, and who ultimately should be paying for it?
Well, so those might be two different answers to two very different questions. But ultimately, it's the producers, and it's not necessarily the guy that has the farrowing operation and produces the feeder pigs. It's not necessarily the cow-calf guy. It's every segment of the industry has a lot of investment in their own segment of that industry. And if a serious animal disease breaks out in the U.S., they stand a lot to lose. So everybody has that to gain. But even if we look at some of the diseases that we've had here in the United States for a period of time, tuberculosis, especially in cattle right now, we're after working all these years on it, we should be almost eliminating tuberculosis, and we're actually maybe seeing a little bit of an upspring of more cases and a concentration in a few states around the nation. And so traceability has a big role to play there, because states that receive feeder cattle from the states where there's a trace out from spend a lot of time and money trying to find that animal. And so there's resources of time and effort being wasted there. And, who pays for it? I think that, we're going to work together to figure that out. I think states and the federal government have a role to play together there. But also, if you don't have skin in the game yourself, if you as a producer, if you haven't put some investment into the system more than just your labor to apply the technology, you're not necessarily going to be as interested in getting back data or figuring out what that traceability can tell you. So I think that everybody, all segments, need to have skin in the game. They need to have investment in the game to be able to really see what's of value to them. Think of your own life and other experiences you've had in other places in your life. If it's just given to you, you take it for granted. Look at your kids or grandkids. If it's just given to them, they tend to take it for granted. They don't value it the same way as if they actually have to earn it themselves. And so I think that that's part of the philosophy we need to incorporate here as well.